They tried to burn me alive in my own home, all for an inheritance. But what they didn't realize was that the woman they thought they'd eliminated was just beginning her fight, and I was going to burn their entire world down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. For 54 years, my life had been a meticulously balanced spreadsheet. Every day was a column, every task a cell, each one filled with the quiet satisfaction of a job done, but never with passion or true joy. I was Donna Matthews, an accountant at Bradley & Associates, and for most of my adult life, I was what I like to call a corporate zombie. I went to work, I did my job well, I came home, I ate dinner, I watched television, and I slept. Repeat. It wasn't a bad life. Not by any stretch, but it certainly wasn't one that made you leap out of bed in the morning. My small house in Tremont was comfortable, my finances in order, my routine unbreakable. My only real deviation from this predictable existence was a bright-eyed, sharp-witted teenager named Maya, whom I'd met one chilly morning a few years back. She was usually perched outside the Starbucks on 5th Street, always reading, always observing. I'd started with a simple $5 bill, then a coffee, then conversations that lasted longer and longer. She was only 17, but she saw more of the world from her street corner than most people did in a lifetime from their corner office. I remember the first day I spoke to her, she was engrossed in a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. I found myself drawn to her quiet intelligence, her unwavering spirit despite her circumstances. She became my unlikely confidant, a splash of vibrant color in my otherwise gray existence. It was at the annual Christmas party, a cacophony of forced cheer and cheap champagne, that the first crack appeared in my meticulously ordered world. My boss, Tom Bradley, a man whose arrogance was only matched by his greed, was holding court by the punch bowl, his booming laugh echoing through the office. I was just passing by when I heard him, his voice laced with venom, say to another colleague, "Oh, Donna, she's just a bleeding heart charity case. Spends half her salary on that homeless kid. Pathetic, really." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pathetic. That was me. That was my kindness, my only genuine connection outside of work, reduced to a weakness, a source of ridicule. I felt a surge of indignation, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Tom had always been unpleasant, but this was a new level of cruel, delivered with a smug satisfaction that churned my stomach. From that moment, something shifted inside me. I began to watch Tom and his ambitious, conniving colleague, Helen Curtis, more closely. Helen, who had just been hired from a competing firm, always had an eye on promotion, and a particularly friendly, almost solicitous manner towards me that suddenly felt manufactured. Maya had often warned me about them, her intelligent green eyes picking up on details I'd missed. "They're always talking in hushed tones, Donna," she'd said just weeks before, "and Helen keeps saying things need to look completely accidental, especially around you." She'd noticed Tom's car was always about to be repossessed despite his executive salary, and Helen's sudden lavish spending that didn't quite match her junior position. I dismissed it as office politics, but Maya, with her street-honed survival instincts, saw something far more sinister. My uneasiness intensified after I received the news about my great-aunt Margaret. She had passed away, and, to my astonishment, left me a substantial inheritance, $280,000, a sum that felt enormous to my accountant's sensibilities. I mentioned it vaguely to Helen during one of her carefully orchestrated friendly chats about my personal life. Her eyes had glinted with an almost imperceptible spark of avarice. Later, I'd seen her talking animatedly with Tom, their heads close, their voices low, glancing in my direction. They were subtly gathering information about my financial situation, my house, my life insurance policies. They'd even used our HR's emergency contact forms to get specifics on my beneficiaries and assets under the guise of updating employee records. I was just a number to them, a mark. Then came the night that would forever cleave my life into a before and after. I was working late as usual, tying up some loose ends, When Maya called my old flip phone, her voice urgent, strained, barely a whisper. "Donna, you can't go home tonight." "Not to your house." She was frantic, out of breath. I was across the street, near the old diner, and I heard Tom and Helen talking in Tom's car in the parking garage. They think I'm invisible, but I heard them clearly. They were talking about your house, about setting it on fire tonight, making it look like an electrical fire. They even said they had someone to take care of things if you were there. She described how Helen had crumpled up a piece of paper, thrown it out the window, and how she'd retrieved it. It was a handwritten note in Helen's distinct looping script detailing my address, the clause in my insurance policy about electrical fires, and a chilling phrase, "Body must be found to confirm." A cold dread settled in my stomach. Arson, yes. But a body? They planned to murder me. My mind reeled. The Christmas party insult. The look accidental whispers. The sudden interest in my finances. The forged will. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I raced back to my desk, my hands shaking and using my forgotten administrator password, logged into Tom's computer. It was all there. His meticulous financial assessment of my inheritance, a chilling timeline of the supposed accidental fire, and a copy of a forged will, naming Helen Curtis as the sole beneficiary of my estate. They weren't just after the insurance money for my house, they wanted Amy dead to access Great Aunt Margaret's inheritance. My world, the stable, predictable one I'd built, shattered into a million pieces. The shock was profound, the hurt unbearable. I had been so blind, so trusting. But in that moment, as the reality of their depravity sank in, something cold and hard solidified within me. The corporate zombie was dead. A survivor was being born. I made a decision that night, a terrifying, irreversible choice. If they wanted me dead, I would be dead. But not truly. I called Detective Sarah Chen, a sharp, empathetic woman I'd met through a community outreach program. I told her a version of the truth, enough to plant seeds of suspicion about an upcoming arson. I didn't mention the murder plot or the will yet, not until I had more proof. I couldn't risk them being tipped off. Then, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to a cheap motel miles out of the city, my mind a storm of fear and resolve. Maya, bless her observant heart, contacted me the next morning, her voice trembling. "Donna, it's on the news. Your house, it burned down last night. They found a body." The words were a knife twist, but also a confirmation. They had gone through with it. They had murdered someone else to put in my place, to make my death convincing. Another invisible person, another victim, discarded by a world that didn't see them. This tragedy fueled my determination. I would bring them all down. The shift within me was absolute. The meek accountant was gone. In her place was a strategist, a meticulous planner. I spent the next few days in a blur of methodical action. I opened new bank accounts, transferring what little personal savings I had, and canceled my credit cards. I secured copies of my original will, my property deeds, and every single insurance policy I held. My house, I remembered, had been overinsured, a detail I'd always meant to rectify, and it contained a specific clause for electrical fires, a target I now understood was no coincidence. I began documenting everything, not in neat columns, but in a series of encrypted files on a burner laptop I bought with cash. Every interaction, every overheard phrase, every financial anomaly Maya recounted, every detail of Tom and Helen's escalating behavior post my death was noted. Maya became my eyes and ears on the street, her observations more valuable than any private investigator. She saw Helen just a week after my death, looking distraught in the office, but then saw her driving a new luxury car, and Tom making plans for a lavish vacation. Maya even managed to snap photos of Helen attempting to probate that forged will, a twisted smile on her face, before the court clerk, thankfully, flagged it as suspicious due to unusual irregularities in the notary's signature. While I operated in the shadows, Tom and Helen, blinded by their greed and arrogance, escalated their schemes, completely unaware they were digging their own graves. They celebrated my untimely demise with thinly veiled glee, Helen already eyeing up new properties online. They thought they were untouchable. Detective Chen, alerted by my initial anonymous tip and finding the will Helen presented so quickly suspicious, had started her own quiet investigation into them. She brought me in, covertly, under a new identity to confirm my survival and the depths of their depravity. It was then I told her everything: the forged will, the inheritance, Maya's warnings, the body in the house. Her face hardened, a grim resolve mirroring my own. The unidentified body was heartbreakingly confirmed to be an older homeless woman, roughly my age, who had been missing for weeks. They had found another invisible person, another forgotten soul, and used her as a prop in their monstrous play. The sheer brutality made me sick, but also gave me unshakable purpose. The situation spiraled further when I received an unexpected visitor at the safe house Detective Chen had arranged. A slick, intimidating man introduced himself as David Morrison, an attorney. He presented me with a non-disclosure agreement, a stack of papers meant to silence me about a larger operation that had gone sideways. His thinly veiled threats, his insistence that I just disappear, confirmed Maya's earlier suspicions about Tom and Helen not acting alone. There was a bigger fish, a criminal network, and they were trying to tie up loose ends. This was no longer just about personal revenge. It was about exposing a vast predatory machine. Detective Chen immediately brought in the FBI. Agent Patricia Ross, sharp and no nonsense, listened to my entire story, her eyes never leaving mine. She believed me. The non-disclosure agreement was the proof they needed of a multi-state criminal enterprise. I agreed to wear a wire. The confrontation took place in a cold, cavernous warehouse in Cleveland's industrial district. The air crackled with tension, but I felt a strange calm. Morrison was there, radiating menace, and then another figure emerged from the shadows. My blood ran cold. It was William Hayes, my great-aunt Margaret's estate attorney. He was the mastermind. The man who was supposed to protect her interests had been systematically targeting his own clients, beneficiaries, using his position to identify vulnerable people with substantial inheritances. He had orchestrated dozens of murders for money, with Tom and Helen merely his local operatives. The shock was profound, but also clarifying. This wasn't just about my small inheritance anymore. It was about justice for countless others. As I calmly laid out the facts, the evidence, the recordings, Hayes' face contorted from smugness to panicked realization. He and Morrison were arrested on the spot, their attempts to bribe or intimidate failing spectacularly against the cold, hard evidence and the quiet, determined woman they had so terribly underestimated. The arrests were just the beginning. The subsequent investigation unraveled a horrifying tapestry of crime. Hayes' network, built on years of murder and fraud, extended across multiple states, responsible for over 70 unsolved cases. The details were sickening. More invisible people, more carefully staged accidents, more families shattered. Tom and Helen, already under local investigation thanks to Detective Chen, were picked up shortly after, their lives crumbling. They were charged not only with my attempted murder and fraud, but with the actual murder of the homeless woman they had used as my proxy. Their jobs vanished, their reputations destroyed, their smug, entitled world utterly collapsing around them. Tom, weeping and begging for leniency, tried to pin everything on Helen, who in turn screamed about Hayes being the true monster. But it was too late for pleas, too late for excuses. The evidence was irrefutable, but the rotten core went even deeper. Maya's keen memory proved invaluable. She recalled Helen once mentioning a boss who needed results and observed strange interactions between Tom, Helen, and certain individuals who seemed to have a degree of influence. Following the money and the network's longevity, the FBI uncovered the most chilling revelation: corrupt law enforcement officials. A police detective, a prosecutor, and even a federal probation officer had been on Hayes' payroll, protecting the network, burying evidence, and ensuring the, quote, accidents were never properly investigated. The scale of the corruption was staggering. Maya and I, two unlikely heroes, found ourselves testifying before a grand jury in Washington, D.C., our voices, once dismissed, now powerful instruments of justice. Hayes, Morrison, Tom, Helen, and the corrupt officials were all indicted on multiple federal and state charges, including first-degree murder, conspiracy, racketeering, fraud, and perjury. Justice, true justice, was finally being served, not just for me, but for all the silent victims. My life, once a monotonous spreadsheet, had been irrevocably altered. I didn't want to go back to being a corporate zombie. That fire had not just burned down my house, it had incinerated my old life, clearing the way for something new, something purposeful. With the secure inheritance from Great Aunt Margaret, I found my new calling. I co-founded Street Angel Investigations with Maya, who, at 17, became our director of field operations. We set up an office, not grand, but functional, and started employing formerly homeless individuals. They had a unique perspective, a keen eye for detail, and a resilience that made them incredible investigators. We leveraged their street smarts, their observational skills, their invisibility to the world, to protect vulnerable people, to expose those who preyed on the unseen. Tom Bradley had called me a bleeding heart charity case. Now that bleeding heart was our shield and our mission. I bought a small, peaceful condo overlooking Lake Erie, a constant reminder of the calm after the storm. The ending wasn't about gleeful revenge. It was about restoration, about reclaiming my life, about finding a purpose far greater than I could have ever imagined. The world was still full of darkness, and the sting of betrayal still lingered. But with Maya by my side, I knew our adventure in crime fighting, our mission to be the angels for those who had none, was only just beginning. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.